Adult babies. Right, it all began with you, Joanne Mitchell, you nasty person. So where did you get the idea from?
Well, I think it's like any of those things. You get an idea, don't you, and you just run with it. I think you actually thought of the title first, didn't you? And then we discussed it, and then we sort of, I plotted out the storyline of it. And previously before that, I'd worked on another film where I'd worked with a very gorgeous young lady who was a dominatrix, who was very interesting, and she worked with various men of a certain stature, and she told me how, and she just basically, in a very eloquent way, talked to me about how they would pay her. It was nothing to do with sex, but it was all to do with. No. And it isn't to do with sex, because adult babies is nothing to do with sex.
That was just my cynical thing, you know.
No, but they were wanting to be subservient to this woman, and she had her own dungeon in Manchester, and she was fascinating, and it sort of escalated from there. And then we just went further and further and further and saw how far we could take it.
Because it is a thing, isn't it? I mean, the adult babies thing is a thing.
It's a wide thing, actually. Because we were in touch with some adult babies, and some of them were upset, saying, you know, this isn't a sexual thing. This is just us wanting to regress back to childhood and be looked after again by a mother figure. However, you know, that's them. But then there's another couple of groups along that spectrum that do other things, you know, that you think, oh wow, that's really dodgy. We haven't gone there, you know. We've stayed within the safe realms. There isn't anything sexual about them. There is a domineering element, but we didn't go as far as the darker edges of it, you know. So, and just be careful out there when you're tapping in adult babies, Attack of the Adult Babies, because don't press images, you know.
And it is a thing, isn't it? Because it is about men. I think it's mostly men, not all men, there are women who do it as well, but mostly sort of in a kind of stressful situation of a job or whatever, and they want to be looked after, they want to have somebody, they want to regress and be completely looked after, and that's fine, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think more than that, we started with the imagery and then we took off from there. So we have kind of borrowed that imagery and that iconic kind of vision of opposites, because it is very rich, fat, powerful men that dress in nappies. You know,
in our film it is.
Yeah. So it was just playing with that imagery, and then the sort of carry on British side of it that certainly Americans and some Europeans look at the British people as kind of kinky sods that are running around massive manor houses. So we played with that as well, you know. So the nurses in suspenders versus the big fat men in nappies, you know. So I kind of quite like that thought of a film stinking of Britishness, or not our experience of Britishness, but you know the outside view of Britishness.
So many people outside of Britain still think it's all about Benny Hill, doesn't
it?
Well,
that's exactly it. That sort of 80s thing, but also there's that sort of throwback to the 80s B movies as well, isn't there? There's that whole kind of horror element to it, and we wanted to just pick all that, didn't we? We wanted to see as far as we could take it, with characters, real characters, hopefully, but they are slightly caricatured as well, because it is heightened. It's all heightened.
Yeah, and for me, I think directing and getting the production side going, I really like the EC the pre-code 1950s comics, where there is always a big manor house and there is always a mad scientist, and then there is always a weird twist, and then there's always a monster in the cellar, and then everything goes crazy. And then I really like that, because you would never get a film like that, and I just thought, it'd be nice if we had that like kind of simplistic view. And again, that's the American view of English, everything's countryside and everything's manor houses.
Yeah, Downton Abbey, that's what they, you know, Downton Abbey meets Benny Hill. That's better than my Mary Millington thing, isn't it? You know?
Yeah, Mary Millington.
I always used to use that. No, it's on a big scope. I mean, it looks big, this. I mean, okay, you've got the stately home that you filmed in, but it you know, it looks like a proper film.
Yeah, it starts small. Quite like, you know, the Time Bandits, when it starts in just like a little terraced house. So we like that idea of starting normal family and then it all goes to shit, you know. So I quite like that as well. But yeah, the scope's enormous. Yeah.
What house did you use? Where was that?
We're allowed to say.
Oh, I
so yeah. I think it's even at Broughton Hall.
In Skipton, beautiful, and that's where we filmed. And we were there for 3 weeks, and we basically slept there, filmed there. That was it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Just the whole time.
We worked out if we could put the fuel budget, the location budget, the accommodation budget, location, everything together. That we could afford to stay there and live there. But then after 2 days of being there, they said, we noticed you haven't used the outside heated swimming pool. And we all went, what? So we had that as well, you know, which was great.
Tennis courts, it was amazing.
Yeah. So we always finished on time, but then the 2 days, the special effects days that went over by 2 or 3 hours, everybody's going,
it was like living in a museum, basically. So we had to be very careful with actors sort of leaving Coke cans on various work surfaces.
Or walking around in nappies.
Yes, and
okay, you don't go way, into the sexual stuff. But the blood stuff is amazing. I mean, you know, you do really go to the extreme with the gore letting, let's be honest.
Yeah, I think so. I personally, and I know we talked about this, I think we could have gone even further, but that's maybe for Return of the Adult Babies or Revenge of the Adult Babies or Night of the Adult Babies, you know, so we would go further. I think, you know, there's other ideas that we got that we went, oh, what about this, what about this?
It's hold something back, just a little bit.
But I was more interested in the imagery and then the fact that it goes, I mean, you know where it ends, kind of like further and further away from where it
I was going to say that. It's the craziest. It is the most insane 20 last minutes I think I've ever seen in any film ever. I mean, it just goes, you know, you've got Alex Chandler, you've got Lee Hardcastle. Yeah. It's like, it's like 2001 and beyond, really. I mean, you know, you're always going to do that, like everything with the kitchen sink thrown in.
Yeah, I wanted loads of animation, so we used we bought the rights to a 1930s cartoon and re-chopped that up to tell a story, you know, because you don't want somebody sat there bleeding to death telling this boring story about, you know, you've got a lot of exposition to get away with, you know, so you think, well, what can we do? Well, let's chop up a cartoon and use that to illustrate it. And then Lee Hardcastle, who we will always work with for in the future because I love him, Alex Chandler, who's a very dear friend, he's better and better and better at his visual effects, and that was, so it's just chucking everything at it, really, you know, and because we weren't beholden to anybody, you know, whereas before we were beholden to maybe Left Films or Metrodome, who are brilliant, you know, and I do think you need somebody to hang on and say, well, you know, we would like it, this is our identity for films, we want it to look like this. Whereas this time they went, well,
do what you want.
Do what you want, there's your money, as long as you tell the story that's in the script that I paid for, off you go, you know, so we're like, nobody turned up on set, nobody turned up in the edit, so we're like, dinner, and they went, what the fuck's that? Which I'm proud of, you know?
I think lots of people will walk out thinking exactly that, won't they?
I hope so.
What's that about? Yeah, but that's a good thing. I don't think that's bad.
But like when you look at if you look at some of the old 80s and 70s films, you know, the darker ones and that, the films did go everywhere wherever they wanted to do, and I think it's as things get more and more, as cameras get better and shooting looks better, then, you know, why do you have to get rid of that element of things? You know, I think it's nice to keep that B-movie element as well as and not being ironic about it. Being B-movie. You know, it's being genuine about it. You know, here's a bit of claymation, and we're not saying here's a bit of shit claymation. We're going, this is the best that we can do.
And you always wanted to be in it, Joe. You wrote a part for yourself, naturally.
Yeah, because,
well, she's not stupid.
No, you've got to see what you get these days. And I suppose, you know, I wanted to be that sort of that character of that. Well, Clinton's is a great character to play, and I wanted to have that. She was just a little monster, and I wanted to. It was something totally different from Bait Before Dawn.
Look, it's the world premiere. I mean,
yes.
You know, so
and thank you.
I know you're really excited and everything. I mean, best scenario, worst scenario.
I honestly think it's going to be mixed. I really do.
I think it is a Marmite film, and but I also think that this is the best crowd to be playing it to.
Yeah, I do.
Is.
Yeah.
And if you know, I think it will. Hopefully, people will enjoy it.
If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere.
I think the older crowd in the 80s will love it, and I'm hoping that the humour is kind of clever enough for the younger ones to get as well. But you just don't know. You know, you lie awake at night going,
there are some very funny moments, but we find them funny, but someone else might not. You just don't know, do you? You don't know, so it's.
I think the imagery and the story and the gore and I don't know.
And there is a social message underneath it all.
Yeah,
of course there is.
If you look hard enough.